I have 7:30, so I think that'd be appropriate.
Okay.
All right. I'll call to order this meeting of the Town of Durham Planning and Zoning Commission. It is Wednesday, July 15th, 2020 at 7:30 p.m. And this meeting is being held via Zoom teleconference. Jen, is Jen on the call?
Yes,
There she
hi.
is. Hi, Jen. Would you be so kind as to call the roll, please?
Sure. Josh Edinger. Joseph Pasquale. Matt Thompson.
Here.
Chris Bailey.
Here.
Jim Frazier. Richard Erickson.
Here.
Frank DeFelice.
Here.
Michael Fumiati. Will Spooner. John D'Annunzio.
Here.
Phil Auger. And Jim Piotrowski.
Here.
All right, I see Josh is signing on now, so we'll just give him a minute more. And if we need to seat any alternates, just let us know, Jen.
Frank, Joe is signing on right now too, and Phil
Oh.
Auger.
All right, thank you. Jen, you may want to call their names for the roll as well.
Okay. Josh Edinger
Here. Here.
and Joe Pasquale. He's not here yet. Phil Auger.
Here.
Joe is connecting now.
Mhm. Yep.
All right, looks like Joe is connected.
Joe, you want to confirm you're here, please? Joe? Hello, Joe.
Looks like he's muted.
He is muted.
Robin, can you unmute Joe? There we
Okay.
go.
Hi,
I'm
Joe.
unmuted.
All
There you
Oh, that's too bad.
right.
Hi.
All right. All right. Are there any other members that we need to
We have 6 regular
Confirm.
members here.
mhm.
And all 3 alternates are present. So I don't know if you
Okay.
want to.
I don't, well, we are going to actually have to vote on some things early on. So let's seat whoever needs to be seated there, Jen.
Should we just? Why don't we?
I'm sorry, you broke up.
I think Jen's frozen.
Uh-oh.
There you go. You're
There
back.
you go. Now we hear you.
Okay. What were you saying, Jen?
So we can seat the 3 alternates for the 3 regular members that are out.
All right. And the 3 alternates that will be seated and the members that are out are?
John D'Annunzio, Phil Auger, Jim Piotrowski will be seated for Will Spooner, Michael Fumiati, and Jim Frazier.
Phil Auger is here, right?
He's an
Yes, I
alternate.
am.
Yeah. Okay, good. All right.
I think, is Mike Fumiati on here though?
Yes, I am.
Okay, he just joined, Jen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it says Terry Fumiati.
Yep.
Yep.
We see. Yep, we see you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Let the record reflect that Mike is here. All right. Have we seated our alternates, Jen?
So we'll seat John D'Annunzio and Jim Piotrowski.
Very good. All right. With that, are there any amendments to the agenda? Hearing none, a motion to approve the agenda as presented would be appropriate.
Move to amend. No,
A
move to
motion.
approve.
Motion to approve. All right, Dick's made a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second it.
Second by Mike Fumiati. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? I declare the motion passed. That brings us to item number 6, which is the payment of bills. We have one bill from Jen Keough for $120, I believe, and that is for the June meeting minutes. Is that correct, Jen? Yes? Okay. All right. Are there any other that we have, Robin?
No other bills.
All right. That being the case, a motion to approve the payment of the bills would be in order.
Move to approve.
Motion by Dick Erickson. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by John Denuzio.
Yep.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? I declare the motion passed. All right. That brings us to item number 8 on tonight's agenda, which is a preliminary discussion on the meeting that is going to begin at 8 p.m. And the reason I thought it would be advantageous for us to have a preliminary discussion is simply that, first of all, this meeting, even though this is our regular Planning and Zoning Commission meeting of the town of Durham, we have several invited guests. The town of Middlefield is invited. The various boards and commissions throughout the town are invited to participate as well. And this is all kind of groundwork for the regional plan of conservation and development. And as some of you will remember, maybe I think all of you will remember, a few years back in Durham, we did our own plan of conservation and development. This is similar, but on a larger scale. So it encompasses the 17 towns that are our region. If I imagine that most of you, if not all of you, have had the opportunity to look at the introductory presentation or participate in one of the two meetings that they offered, RiverCog did, on the introduction of RiverCog and the introduction to the Regional Plan of Conservation and Development. And so what I wanted to do before the 8 o'clock meeting with RiverCog starts is go through and just kind of maybe talk a little bit about some of the questions that they've put forth for us, and also some of the issues that you know you as commissioners may have that we can certainly bring to their attention. So I guess I'll start with the first question, which is, what is your vision for the Lower Connecticut River Valley? Kind of a far-reaching question, right? But you know, it's 17 towns. It includes Durham. It goes all the way to the shoreline, and you know, they'll be asking these questions, and they're going to kind of want some feedback, some discussion. So, are there any other commissioners that have any kind of a suggestion or anything that they can offer as to the question of what is your vision for the Lower Connecticut River Valley?
Frank?
Yes, Matt.
Joe had been kind enough to email me the questions last week, and I took some time to sit down and I typed up some answers, but I don't need to read the answers, but I would be happy to share what I kind of came up with if you want me
If
to.
you want, just with the commission members to kind of, so when this comes at us, you know, we have thought, given a little consideration. Please go ahead, Matt.
For the first question they asked, the vision for the Lower Connecticut River Valley, you know, I talked about how it's really nice that we have a rural and agricultural feel to the towns in the area. And I said it'd be fantastic to have, you know, some more working farms, similar in size and scope to something like, I don't know if you've ever been to Penfield Farm in Portland. It's a farm that does everything from emu to cattle to chicken to pork. But just kind of, you know, it's a draw for a lot of people in the surrounding towns to go there to get farm products. And we don't have a lot of that in this area. It'd also be nice to have breweries and vineyards, which I know we've been working on. And, I said that one of the things that I would love to highlight for this region would be the Mattabesset Trail, which links a lot of the towns. And it's really some really nice hiking, especially in Guilford and Madison and the line all the way up through Durham. We have the ability to use, I think, what we have geographically that would really set us up economically also if we were to highlight some of those strengths. So.
Good stuff. Very good stuff. Are there other folks that have given the question a little bit of consideration? Maybe we can just talk it through.
Yes, this is Jan Wojers from PNZ in Middlefield.
Yes.
My thought was that Lower Connecticut Valley, River Valley, should present themselves as an area of tourism and all kind of outdoor activities for families and individuals.
Okay, very good points. All right. Others that may have a kind of an opinion on this? Josh? I know you've given this some consideration.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was mostly looking for some guidance on the direction, right? Is it the question of like, well, what do we think of as the brand for the regional area? Because while I agree, it does include Middletown, which I think is going to have quite of a different feel. But I agree with you in that, largely it is a tourist destination. You'd think of, it has the coast, it has a lot of outdoor recreation, it has, the restaurants of Middletown. And so I think that is the common theme, but I was curious also, mostly I agree with that notion that is a little bit of the sort of brand, but I was trying to think larger than that. And I haven't sort of settled on anything yet of sort of like, as a region, what are we known for? Certainly the river sort of ties us together, as is the name of the group, the River Cog. And that sort of has its own sort of image and benefit. So anyway, I'm sorry, I actually haven't, I've thought about it a lot. I haven't settled on something that I think is a reasonable answer yet.
And that's fine. That's kind of why I wanted to walk through this with everybody so that, we just give it a little bit of consideration before everybody gets on the call. I will tell you, I find the use of the word brand that you put forth very interesting. That was one of the things that we actually discussed early on regarding that, how we would make, what would be our selling point? What, is there an opportunity to use that? All right, why don't we go to the next question? We'll talk about that a little before they get on the
Sorry,
call.
Frank, I used the raise hand feature. Maybe you didn't see it.
Oh, I didn't see it. I'm sorry, Phil. Go ahead.
No worries. Just one aspect of it from a commercial standpoint that I think might be worth thinking about is historically Middletown was a pretty decent port. Here in Connecticut, we have the Deep Harbor in New Haven and New London that is pretty active. And I think it would potentially be beneficial if a certain type of shipping traffic were restored to Middletown, where there is a railroad hub, et cetera. This has long-term visions, and I know transport is part of it. So I think the river as a conduit should be thought of.
Okay. And Joe, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, Frank. Sorry, I missed the beginning part of it because of a bad connection, but I think I got it straightened out now.
Good.
Yeah, when I look at the region, I agree with Josh, and I think that one of the important things is to identify some branding for our region. When you look at the eastern side of our state, where they've labeled themselves the last green belt, and you got the quiet corner, and the Litchfield Hills. And when I look at our region, it seems to me at a glance that we're the entrance to the shoreline for most of central Connecticut and central Massachusetts via 91, and then utilizing Route 9. And as we know, in Durham, we get a tremendous amount of shoreline activity during the weekend and a lot on the weekends. And we have a tremendous amount of open space in the region. And when you look at the number of state parks that we have compared to the rest of the state, our region is loaded with state parks on both sides of the river.
Yeah.
And probably one of the most significant acreage totals, I think, that we could capitalize on for recreational purposes, between what the state owns, what towns own, what we have for land trust properties. I think that recreation is a huge plus for us.
Good. All right, because of time constraints here, I'll move on to the second question. But thank you, Joe. Those were good observations, I think. Again, I like the use of the brand. So let's ask number two. Let's talk about this briefly. What do you see as your town's role in the region? And we have Durham on the call. We also have Middlefield on the call. I don't have any objection to anyone kicking in here a little bit. What do you see as our role in the region? What is it? Anybody want to weigh in?
This is Jan Wojcik.
Yes, Jan.
I'd like to talk about Middlefield.
Yeah.
And what we can contribute as of today.
Okay.
I see Middlefield to be a point of interest for a variety of outdoor activities, starting from golf for individuals as well as families. We have 4 courses, 3 at Lyman Orchards and 1 at Indian Springs. We have golf classes for kids and ladies. Kids Golf League, Ladies Golf League, Higby Mountain hiking trails, skiing, snowboarding, outdoor concerts, mountain biking, zip lines, 10 hotel rooms at Powder Ridge, boating, kayaking, fishing at Bisek Lake, skateboarding, soccer fields, baseball fields and Peckham Park, sunflower maze, apple cannon, hay rides, seasonal fruit picking and related outdoor activities, guided small group tours at historic Lyman Homestead, and about a dozen restaurants. I think this is in a brief what we can offer right now, but there is a lot of friendly, I would say, nature areas which could offer some other activities.
Okay.
And I just hope that this organization would help us to put our town on the map.
Very good. Thank you, John.
Yeah, if I could get in there. If you look at our 2 towns, Durham and Middlefield, remember this: in Middlesex, in the River Cog region, and for that matter, in Middlesex County, we are the only 2 towns that border major large urban cities. Middlefield, we border Meriden and Middletown, and to some extent Cromwell, but no, I'm sorry, not Cromwell, but Wallingford. And Durham does the same. It borders the city of Middletown and Wallingford. So we are the buffer, if you will, between the urban areas and the rest of Middlesex County, which has a more spread out, more rural-like atmosphere. So that's a unique position for our towns.
That's a very interesting observation, and I never thought about it, but I think you're absolutely right. This is Ed Bailey from Middlefield, the first selectman that just spoke. All right, I see Josh, you had your hand up. Go ahead. You're going to have to unmute yourself.
Yeah,
there you go.
There we go. And then just sort of summarizing those 2 points. Right, we are a little bit of a buffer, but we're also largely, whether we want to be or not, we are a bedroom community. We end up being the sort of recreational and home base for people that then work in more urban areas, whether that be as far as New Haven or Hartford, because it ends up being a nice midpoint. I don't know that that's what we want to be. I think that is what we are. And then it's always a question of like, aspirationally are we okay with that? And so then you say, okay, well, if that is the case, that's what we are, then you'd double down maybe and say, okay, we want to people know about how nice it is to live in our communities, you know, how good our schools are and what kind of recreation we have. And there's an aspirational thing of saying, well, we want some more industry that will bleed over from those urban areas. And so I don't know the answer, whether that's what we want to be, but I agree, and that's sort of what we are right now.
Okay, good. Let's move on to the next question. That is, what are the challenges that your town is facing that would be easier to address regionally or with neighboring towns? And it's good that we have Middlefield on the call here, but any of the members, there anyone on the call that would like to just kind of offer some suggestions there so we can kind of develop maybe some thoughts about this item before the 8 o'clock hour. So these are challenges the town is facing.
All right.
Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
You know, one of the challenges I think that we're facing is actually with affordable housing, and you know, that's something that the town absolutely needs to address. But obviously, you know, addressing that with neighboring towns also I think is pretty important for attracting younger working families to the region that maybe can't afford a home, given, you know, how expensive it is to live in these towns.
Okay. Others? Joe, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think one of the things that, well, Durham and Middlefield are experiencing is the declining school population, and whether there's something regionally, if the other towns, which I guess are probably experiencing the same thing, is there more that can be done regionally?
Good. That's a really good point. And of course, they are regional with us, right? All right. Let's move on to item number 4, or question number 4, rather. And this is, what do we do well in our region and what don't we do well in our region? So from a regional perspective, what is it that we don't do so well at? Anybody got any thoughts on that?
This is Jan Waters again.
Yes, Jan.
I think in Connecticut, we do very well maintain the character of the state. But we don't do very well with sharing information.
And how so?
Well, like for instance, I'm talking about sharing information between towns. That traveling through Connecticut is pretty much, and I'm talking about tourism. Connecticut is a land of hidden gems. And sometimes it's really hard to find the information about something so attractive and being just, you know, next town.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And that kind of gets back to maybe the idea that of branding or tourism. All right, others that might want to weigh in on that question number 4? We have a few minutes left. Josh, please.
Well, I don't want to monopolize, so I mean, certainly if others have more to say. I would say, you know, and I'll be brief then about my point. I do think that we are fearful of cooperating more in the region, meaning we like our independence. You know, in Connecticut, historically, with our whatever 169 towns and everybody having all of their own central governments, I would say probably leads to more spending in running our towns than if we regionalized more. But I do think that one of our dilemmas is that we don't want to give up that authority, or at least the perception or the feel that we're giving up the ability to self-regulate.
Yep, that's a good point. All right, and as we have just about 5 minutes left, I'll go on to the last question, and this is kind of open-ended. How could a regional plan of conservation and development support your town? So that's the last of the 5 questions that that you'll be asked tonight, and certainly those are not limiting questions. You're free to comment or weigh in on anything that you think is beneficial. This is basically going to be the plan of the towns, all of them, 17. So certainly there's no boundary here. So to the question, how could a regional plan of conservation and development support your town? Does anyone have any comments or thoughts about that?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, my name is Mary Ann Corona, and I'm from Middlefield.
Hi, Marianne.
One of the things we're already involved in, but we need to be involved in much more, is what really joins us. For instance, the Coggins River goes through 4 towns, Guilford, Durham, Middlefield, and Middletown. That's a connecting ingredient, if you will. We need to pay more attention to the environmental aspects of our community, that and the wetlands that transcends the towns too. And I speak as a former wetlands commissioner and chair, and I serve on a river board for the Coggins for the 4 towns representing Middlefield. And I think more effort and more attention needs to be paid to that so that it helps the generations yet to come.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments. And you're absolutely right. The Coggins is kind of a connecting feature for at least for Durham and Middlefield and Middletown, I think.
Well, there's one more comment I would add. I have not seen the questions in advance, and I'm sorry about that, but I called the town clerk's office and there was no information or print there.
No, this is came from River Cog as part of the presentations.
I understand, but the other problem Middlefield has, and it's going to grow, is the state park. Wadsworth State Park is an absolute overflow every single week. And more people are going to the state parks, given what we're going through with the epidemic. And we've got to figure out some other ways and some other places to help them with that, whether it be transportation or advertising. But I wish you could see Cherry Hill Road and Wadsworth State Park, and then the road that goes into Middletown, loaded, absolutely loaded all the time.
Okay. Well, I have seen the crowds as I've driven by, so I understand what you're talking about.
There's garbage and everything else affiliated with this issue.
All right. With that, we'll just give everybody a couple of more minutes here now to sign in, and we'll let RiverCog start their presentation at 8 o'clock. This exercise was really just kind of to get your juices flowing and your thoughts going, especially the commission members, both in Durham and Middlefield, that from planning and zoning, because these will be issues that RiverCog folks will be asking us about. So let's see what we've got here. Robin?
Yep.
Do we have Sam and Megan from RiverCog in the waiting room, or are they on?
We have Sam on, and I believe we have Torrance on. I don't think Megan's going to be part of the presentation tonight, is my understanding.
All right,
Yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah, Megan is still presenting over in Old Saybrook. So.
All right.
We're tag teaming.
Well, we got the A team, and that's great. So we're going to we'll give about a 1 minute more, and then I'll do the introductions, and I'll turn it over to you folks. We'll wait till 8 o'clock because there are still people that are signing in.
Good attendance tonight, Frank and Middlefield folks.
Yeah, they're a good bunch. They really care about their towns, and they're not afraid to come out and discuss and talk about the pros and cons and what's important to them.
Yeah. Hi, Tatiana.
All right, as it is now 8 p.m., I'd like to introduce the folks from Rivercog that are going to be providing our presentation this evening. First is the Executive Director of the Lower Connecticut River Valley Council of Governments, Sam Gold. Sam has been the Executive Director for several years at Rivercog. And this exercise that we're going to do tonight is kind of to bring you saw some of you participate in the first segment or module, if you will, which was the introduction. And this is kind of a dialogue with each town. And each town, in this case, just because the towns are so close and conserve energy, we have Durham and Middlefield with us tonight. The other person that'll be helping is Torrance Downs. Torrance is the Deputy Director of the Lower Connecticut River Valley Council of Governments, also a longtime planner and basically very experienced in all of the towns, working in all of the towns in our region. So with that, Sam and Torrance, I'll turn it over to you. And one thing I would like to say before I kind of like turn it over to you is as we go through the presentation tonight, if you have questions when we get to the Q&A, please use the raise hand feature on your Zoom screen. And if you would do that, I'll try to keep an eye on that so that I can acknowledge and recognize anyone that wishes to speak. So,
Yeah.
Sam, it's all yours.
And you can find the raise hand feature if you click on participants. You'll see the list of everyone who's participating. And on the lower right-hand corner, at least on my screen, it says there's a button that says click raise hand, and then the raise hand icon comes up. Anyway, so I will get started. Thank you very much, Frank, for that introduction. And as I did mention, Rivercog staff is doing 2 of these tonight. The other presentation started at 7 in Old Saybrook, and they're just wrapping up now. All right, so I'm going to share my screen and start the PowerPoint.
Very good.
Okay. All right. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. And also, thank you to Durham and Middlefield Planning and Zoning Commissions for allowing us time to speak with you this evening. We really appreciate the residents commissioners from both towns coming together for this presentation. My name, as Frank already said, is Sam Gold, and I'm the Executive Director of the Lower Connecticut River Valley Council of Governments, which also goes by Rivercog. And joining me in this presentation is Rivercog's Deputy Director, Torrance Downs, who you also were introduced to just a minute ago. We'd like to begin this meeting with a brief presentation, followed by an open discussion based on the 5 questions that were circulated and that you just completed discussion of. Everyone but the presenters should be muted during the presentation, so if you're not muted, please mute yourself. And as we go into the question and answers, please unmute yourself before speaking, of course. And we'll go more into those procedural matters when we get to that portion of the presentation. And overall, we expect this to last about an hour, but if people want to ask more questions, we're happy to stay longer. Also, I would like to recognize Durham's RPC member and our Regional Planning Committee Chairman, Frank DeFelice. So thank you very much for hosting us this evening.
You're welcome. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah. And with that, let's begin. Why are we here? Well, as a reminder, Rivercog, the Regional Planning Committee, the RPC, and our consultant, Alton Halliday, are working on the first regional plan of conservation and development for the Lower Connecticut River Valley region. On June 29th and on July 7th, we held region-wide introductory presentations that offered a primer on Rivercog, the RPC, and what a regional plan is. We will begin tonight's presentation with a brief recap of the key takeaways from that introductory presentation, which is also available on the project website, rivercogregionalplan.org, if you'd like to watch the recording. We will then spend a few minutes explaining what we mean by region and why is it that we think regionally. The purpose of this discussion is to focus on our perspective, although we are here to learn about your town's issues and goals. It is important to keep in mind that we're creating a regional plan, So our focus should be on how your town's issues and goals fit into a regional context. We will highlight some examples of this by showcasing a few of your goals from your POCD and comparing them to other towns across the region. Then we will turn to the rest of the meeting over to you to discuss your responses to the 5 questions that were circulated before the meeting. At the introductory presentation, we set out to answer a few key questions, which I will briefly recap. First, why are we here? As I mentioned at the onset, we are creating the region's first regional plan of conservation and development. What is RiverCog? RiverCog is the regional planning organization for the Lower Connecticut River Valley. What is the RPC? The RPC, or the Regional Planning Committee, is made up of appointed representatives from each of our 17 municipalities and has been tasked to oversee the creation of the Regional Plan of Conservation and Development. And what is an RPOCD, or Regional Plan? It is a visionary document that guides land use patterns in the region over the next 10 years. Also, at the introduction presentation, we answered the question of why we think regionally. And we think regionally because thinking as region can help our municipalities solve common problems and achieve common goals. Well, what do we mean by region? Well, specifically, we are talking about the Lower Connecticut River Valley, which is made up of 17 municipalities: Chester, Clinton, Cromwell, Deep River, Durham, East Haddam, East Hampton, Essex, Haddam, Killingworth, Lyme, Middlefield, Middletown, Old Lyme, Old Saybrook, Portland, and Westbrook. Each of these municipalities is unique in character, but their geographic proximity means that certain common conditions will exist among them and that certain issues and goals will necessarily be shared. In addition, many issues and goals will have impacts that cross municipal boundaries. What happens in Durham could very well have an impact on Middlefield and vice versa. The unique character of each municipality also means that each has its own strengths and weaknesses. Our municipalities are interdependent, relying on each other in areas such as housing, jobs, infrastructure, and critical public services. As part of the RPOCD, we will be examining these common issues and goals, as well as the areas where our towns are interdependent, and provide a roadmap of coordination and cooperation. As part of this effort, hearing from you about what matters to your town is critically important. Although this is the first regional plan for the Lower Connecticut River Valley region, it is important to reiterate that we're not starting from zero. Our analysis of common issues and goals began with a review of the municipal POCDs for all 17 towns. After our review, we compared the POCDs and found that they do, in fact, share a great deal in common. Let's look at some of the goals of Durham's POCD. But first, I'd like to note that these goals were chosen to showcase the breadth of topics covered and were not meant to imply any level of particular importance. 1, in order to build upon these are some of the goals from your POCD in Durham. In order to build upon its reputation as an agricultural community, the town, in conjunction with the Agriculture and Economic Development Commissions, should consider the development and promotion of agritourism, day trips, and other agricultural events. 2, roadway and subdivision regulations should be updated to include requirements for pedestrian and bicycling trails and routes for non-motorized vehicles. 3, review and, if necessary, revise building and land use regulations to accommodate the construction of smaller homes, consider higher density development in areas where septic and soil limitations are not problematic, and consider compact, mixed use, and transit-oriented development patterns. And 4, the Historic District Commission shall encourage community events on the town green and within the district to build support for historic preservation efforts and to cultivate pride and a desire to protect our heritage. In Middlefield's POCD, we identified these common goals which are shared across the region. 1, encourage accessory commercial ventures such as tourism sites, public harvest, equestrian centers, bed and breakfast inns, and retreat learning centers. Such building and activity centers should be clustered to maintain large surrounding open areas. 2, promote energy efficient transportation alternatives to the single occupancy vehicle, such as ride sharing, mass transportation, bicycling, walking, and integrate them into the traffic system. When we look across the region at other municipal POCDs, These goals were widely shared. 16 towns had goals related to increasing or promoting tourism and recreation, with 7 having goals specifically on agricultural tourism. All 17 towns had goals related to improving bicycle and pedestrian connections. 15 towns had goals related to encouraging mixed use and/or higher density development in targeted locations. 12 had goals related to promoting education and sensitive stewardship of cultural resources. And all 17 had goals relating to diversifying our housing stock. And 14 had goals related to creating connectivity between key nodes in town. To be clear, the level of importance of each of these goals to the various municipalities differ, as does the exact verbiage. But the point of the exercise is to show that each of our towns, at least on a base level, agree on what is needed in the region going forward. So at this time, I'm going to turn over the presentation to Torrance Downs, our Deputy Director. And this is now when the time when we want to hear from you. So take it over, Torrance.
Okay, again, my name is Torrance Downs, and for those of you on the 2 P&Zs, you may recognize my name as who signs the referral letters you receive when you have regulation proposals that we need to review. So as Sam said, we've reviewed your plans and made regional comparisons based on data and our own professional experience, but you live in your town and have an intimate understanding of how it functions, what it needs, and what makes it special. Before we turn to the 5 questions that were circulated prior to this meeting and which were discussed by a number of you from 7:30 to 8 o'clock, we're going to go over some procedural matters. We will look at the question one at a time with 10 minutes for discussion of each. If you would like to speak, use the raise hand function, and Frank, I guess we'll have you call on them.
Absolutely. That'll be fine.
Please try to keep your comments to 2 minutes and leave time for others to respond if there are other responses. If you have more to say when your time is up, we can return to you and then in the end, time permitting, go back to you. If discussion on any question ends before the allotted time, we'll just move on to the next question. And then any time at the end can be used to revisit any of those questions after we've discussed all 5. Similarly, if a discussion goes beyond 10 minutes, we'll move on and can revisit that question at the end, again, time permitting. Finally, we do understand that these are some pretty big topics to be discussed in only 10 minutes. And also, sometimes people aren't necessarily comfortable, speaking in front of a lot of people. If you have any thoughts or comments on any of these questions that you're not able to express at this meeting, you can always email them to our senior plan. Frank mentioned Megan, who's doing the old Sabre discussion right now. That's Megan Juflis at mjuflis@rivercog.org, and we'll put her name and email address in the chat box for you. You can reach out to your RPC member if you want. For Durham, as you know, that's Frank. And Middlefield is currently unrepresented on the RPC, and we did have a couple of members of other towns join the RPC as a result of listening to the initial webinar. So if any of you are interested from Middlefield, you can reach out to Megan or Sam or me and or Ed Bailey, and we'll help you get appointed. So so from here, we'll go ahead and ask the question. Again, we've asked these questions already and you've discussed them, but there are some folks that weren't on the call originally. And if any of those of you who've already discussed this, if you have any additional thoughts or want to clarify what you said, please feel free to do that. I took notes the first time through. So the first question was, what is your vision for the Lower Connecticut River Valley? So
one thing, if I may interrupt just for a moment, Torrance.
Sure.
If the initial 7:30 to 8 o'clock, if you had thoughts on that, please feel free to repeat those thoughts, because this is actually the formal meeting, and that was really an exercise to kind of get people in the group to start thinking about what might be important, or that they might want to provide as answers to that. So please, this is the real show. That was kind of like the warm up, if you will. All right, Torrance, go ahead.
So again, what is your vision for the Lower Connecticut River Valley region? What are your thoughts on that?
All right, I see Matt Thompson has his hand up. Matt, go ahead.
I'm just going to kind of repeat what I guess I said when we walked through this earlier. You know, I spoke about Penfield Farm in Portland and how that is really a fantastic place and it draws a lot of people from, I know, Glastonbury and East Hampton and surrounding towns. It would be fantastic to see other farms take on sort of like a similar scope as Penfield does. I also spoke earlier about the Mattabasset Trail. You know, it connects Guilford, Durham, Madison, Haddam, Middletown, Middlefield, Meriden. Those towns, you know, we all have a lot to offer. And I know that that trail, that there's some excellent hiking. It's some of the best views in the state. And I know that other people spoke about the need to attract tourism. And I think that, you know, sort of highlighting our environment and what we have to offer would go a long way in attracting business and economic activity. So that's kind of, that's where I stand.
Oh, good. Well done. Others wishing to speak on this question? What is your vision for the Lower Connecticut River Valley? Joe, did you want to say anything? I think you had some comments to that.
Yeah, I guess it kind of goes along with what Matt was referring to, that it seems when you look at our region and the 17 towns compared to other parts of our state, that we have a tremendous amount, if not maybe the most, I think it'd be worthy of investigating, that we have a significant amount of state land, town-owned land, land trust property, for recreational uses. And I think as a region, we should try to capitalize on that. I think we probably have the most state parks as a region compared to other parts of the state on both sides of the river. And I think regionally, that's something that we should try to capitalize on.
All right. Thank you. And I have Laura Francis followed by Jean Wojcik. Laura?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us here tonight. So when I think about our region, I go back to the study that RiverCog did a few years ago, an economic development study, to see where our opportunities are, and we did a little analysis of what we currently have. And two surprises came from that study. At least they were surprises to me. That we, as a region, are much stronger in manufacturing than I think many of us believe. And also that we are very strong in what they characterized as lifestyle businesses. These are people who could make the money that they are making doing the thing that they are doing anywhere, but they choose to do it in Middlesex County or in the RiverCog region. And so I think this plan should reflect that finding and encourage that finding. So why were we so surprised to find that we are as strong as we are in manufacturing? Well, it's because we have manufacturers in our region that are pretty much operating under the radar. And so if that happened by accident or if that happened by design, we need to encourage and strengthen that, right? Because manufacturing, if we've learned nothing from this COVID experience, we need to start making more products here on our shore. And we need to reshore what we have offshored for many years. And I think we need to pay attention to that, number one. Number two, as far as the lifestyle businesses, again, if we learned nothing from this COVID experience, we've learned that many of us have successfully worked from home. And if that is the case going forward, in fact, if it's a case going forward even in a bigger way than before, then we stand, I think, ready to attract more of that. So I am hoping that this regional plan will take a look at those two things. Thank you for letting me comment.
Thank you very much, First Selectwoman Laura Francis. Jean, I have you next. Go ahead.
Yes, as I mentioned before, I personally like to see tourism and all kind of outdoor activities for families and individuals, especially in the light of development of COVID-19. A few weeks ago or a month ago, when most of the golf courses in neighboring states were closed, Lyman Orchard was open, and it was pretty much blooming. It was really hard to get to book tea time, and I think we should learn from that one, that we can provide all kind of outdoor activities, which by definition are safer in relationship to development of COVID-19.
All right. Thank you very much for your comment, John. I think I have Ed Bailey, First Selectman of Middlefield. Is that correct, Ed? You have your hand up?
Yes, that's correct. Thanks, Frank. Yeah, just a comment, just to follow up a little bit on what Laura mentioned. That study did mention, it did have a big piece on lifestyle and people who work at home. And, during this current pandemic situation, a lot of people have been working from home. And that just, that's something we need to look at on what we can to support more of that in our River Cog region. And that may be some things such as 5G internet and so on, and areas that are underserved to make sure that they are brought up to a better technological level, so that we can encourage this more and grow upon what we already have in place. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your comments. I appreciate that, Ed. And the other thing I would just add before we move on, if time expires, Torrance, is if you listen to the preliminary discussion that we had, the term branding was kind of brought up twice relative to the tourism aspect. And I thought that was kind of interesting because for some time we've talked a little bit about that subject. I see Josh Edinger has his hand up. Go ahead, Josh.
One thing I did want to sort of mention in that, we have talked about sort of the idea that we are interconnected from this like sort of tourism perspective and outdoor activity. And, one thing that does seem to haunt us sometimes is, we do have these state roads that run, and I'm not talking about like Route 9, I'm thinking more like Route 17, which we don't tend to be able to make much traction on reducing the traffic load that is undesirable, like heavy trucks, or, making them accessible for biking. And that is an area that sort of supports a little bit of this vision that we're talking about, and I think is very useful for us to come together as a group because of the nature of them being, state managed roads. So that's sort of one thing I wanted to comment on.
All right. Thank you very much, Josh. Torrance, how are we doing for time on this question?
We were just about finished with the 10 minutes, Frank.
Well, let me just, if I may, just in case there's somebody that can't put their hand up, if anybody wishes to comment on this question, please go ahead, just identify yourself if you would, so that we can, you're free to speak.
Good. We'll go to number 2 now.
Okay.
Yeah, there were some reiterations of what was discussed earlier and some expounding on those, as well as some new ones. So that's good. Keep it up. Number 2, what do you see as your town's role in the River Cog region?
All right. Question number 2, what do you see as your role, Durham and Middlefield, in the region? So who wishes to speak on that? Matt, did you have any comments prepared for that one?
Sure. I mean, I'll share what I had. You know, obviously I spoke earlier about utilizing farming and, you know, by extension of farming, I'm including breweries and possible vineyards, which I know the town of Durham has sort of started to look at. But also, you know, and I spoke about this earlier as well, I would love to see us improve affordable housing in the region. And I think Durham could be a part of that in some capacity. I know it's come up in surrounding towns in the past, but we need to be able to attract younger working families in the town or into the region. And I know I wasn't the only person that kind of mentioned that as an issue in terms of declining enrollment and, you know, that sort of thing. So that's all I got.
All right. I see First Selectwoman Laura Francis. You have your hand up? Go ahead, Laura.
Thank you, Matt, for bringing up those topics. It is something that I wanted to mention in one of these areas tonight. So I see Durham's role as a supporting player. And I say that because I understand that Durham's not an island and that we are very much dependent upon the other towns in our region for a lot of things. For instance, we get a lot of our medical and our social services services from Middletown. You know, we enjoy the riverfront from the towns in our regions that are lucky enough to have the river go through their towns. So I feel that because we enjoy the benefits of so many of the other towns, that I feel Durham needs to play a supporting role for other towns. And one of the things that we've always been very strong about is to give good education and a nice quality of life here in Durham. And I think that it's high time that Durham takes some affirmative action to make that quality of life affordable for everyone. And I think that it's that in this plan, there should be some emphasis on that.
All right. Thank you for your comments, Laura. Others wishing to speak? I would just note also, Torrance, that Durham's agricultural history is kind of placed in it. I suspect that there are many people that see Durham as being kind of an agricultural hub, or at least an agricultural an opportunity to engage in agriculture. And some of the things that the town has done recently, moving towards that goal that was identified in the municipal POCD.
So the agricultural history and the role is important, I guess Middlefield too, but to the entire region, that's a core importance of your town. Okay.
All right. Do we have others wishing to respond to this question number 2? What do you see as your town's role in the region?
I'm
If you'd
not
like
sure.
to, go ahead, please.
Yes, it's Mary Ann Corona. It's so important that local areas be able to produce food, particularly given what we've seen in the past few months. And Lyman Farm is doing an outstanding job with that. And they have for a long time, and they've increased their agricultural output. Yeah, Middlefield has just about everything. We have a very high-tech industry in Zygo. We have the hiking on Connecticut Forest and Park. We have the public open space down at Wadsworth, which is overloaded. We have Lake Besic, we have the ski area, and for a small town 5 miles across, that's saying something. We also have the 2 largest power line, high line crossings in the state in Middlefield. They're the highest taxpayer, by the way, too. So, I mean, for a town our size, we're like the model town. We have everything. And but particularly I'd like to emphasize, I agree with who talked about the 4 golf courses, because that is actual open space most of the year. Plus, drive through Lyman's and look at the food that's coming out of there. So I have said enough about that.
Good comments. Thank you very much, Mary Ann. Others wishing to speak on this question? Question number 2, what do you see as your town's role in the region? Are there any callers on the phone that would like to speak? You're having difficulty raising your hand because of the being on the cell phone rather than the Zoom software? All right. How are we doing for time on this one, Torrance?
Well, we're a little short of 10 minutes, but if there are no more comments, we can move on. And if anybody has any additional thoughts, we can come back and add that to the responses for that question.
Yeah, and I think
on to number 3.
I think one of the things that would take away from what I heard earlier also what had to do with the fact, and Laura alluded to this, is that Durham and Middlefield are somewhat, in some ways, supporting. They're not exactly bedroom communities, but they're not a Middletown, they're not a New Haven. They're the place where people live because they like living there.
Right.
All right. Are there any other? Oh, I see, Joe, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, somebody else had mentioned it earlier in the conversations about both Durham and Middlefield have rail service. And that's something that some of the other communities for freight don't have, that we should try to maybe capitalize on also.
It's a good point. You don't often hear that, but that's true.
Yeah, first time that's been mentioned, so that's a good one, Joe.
Yeah, it's a freight service, I think, Torrance, for Tilcon, and I'm not sure who else is using the line, but.
Good, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the freight line through Wallingford.
Yeah, I think it goes through, I think it ultimately goes through Wallingford. Ed Bailey from Middlefield, have your hand raised? Ed?
Yes, sorry about that. I was muted.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Just to expand on that a little bit, one of the things that Middlefield and Durham also is our proximity to the new railroad station in Meriden. And, that's the Hartford to New Haven line, soon to be Springfield to New Haven line. And I do know of people already in Middlefield that utilize that commuter service to get down to New Haven, and in some cases they may go to other parts in Fairfield County to work and so on. So our proximity to that is very close. Literally 5 minutes from Middlefield, you can be at the train station in Meriden. So I just wanted to point that out since the subject of transportation came up.
Good. That's a good point. Thank you very much. Torrance?
Okay, we'll go to number 3 now. What are the challenges your town is facing that would be easier to address working regionally or with your neighboring towns?
All right. Ed, do you have your hand up again, or is that from before? Ed Bailey?
Residual hand raised.
It was from before, but I do have a comment on that. And I think,
well, please do. Go ahead.
I think challenges that we would be better addressed regionally is certainly transportation. And we are doing that at the moment. Middletown Area Transit and Ninetown Transit are in talks about merging into a more efficient and more powerful public transportation network. So that is in progress, and RiverCog is coordinating that that study and that we hope will lead to a merger. So that I think is a very something that we just cannot do on our own. Small towns can't really provide any meaningful public transportation, and this is an opportunity to strengthen throughout the River Cog area, our public transportation. So I think that's something that we absolutely must do cooperatively as towns.
All right, thank you very much, Ed. And I see Laura Francis, First Selectwoman of Durham, has her hand raised. Go ahead, Laura.
Thank you, Frank. So I echo, and I've been working closely with Ed on the transportation issues, but another one that we need to address regionally goes back to my original comments about working from home and the lifestyle businesses that we are strong with in our region. And that is fiber infrastructure, broadband infrastructure, and bringing that to our more rural communities and suburban communities has to be done on a regional basis. I just on Monday met with a developer looking to bring some 5G technology into our community, and that's going to help our public safety communication network regionally. We have applied for a regional performance improvement grant regionally to do that. These are the types of things, we're working with Middletown with bringing water into Durham, and we're looking with the state of Connecticut to, even while we're building that project now, already working to increase and build upon the project that's going on now. So those are the types of things that we are stronger together building out. So infrastructure, utilities, and transportation.
Thank you very much, Laura. I have Marilyn Koration next, and then I have Joe Pasquale on deck. Marilyn, go ahead.
Hi. I think that regionally, really the only way we can address clean water issues. Our rivers, our streams, our creeks do not see the boundaries, and they carry whatever is in them from one place to another. And if we can't get a grip on that regionally with whoever we're touching, then there's no hope. But coliform counts and runoff and all of those things don't just affect where they happen, they affect the downstream. And I think that's something that's impossible to do without that connection with the neighbors.
Good point. Thank you very much for your comments. Joe, go ahead.
One of the comments that I made earlier was when we discussed this was declining school population, and that's something potentially we could look at from a regional perspective to see if there's anything that can be done to help communities deal with that. The other thing that I'd like to mention too is the solid waste stream and our transfer stations. And maybe Laura, maybe you could speak to this, because I had listened to the Board of Selectmen meeting that was held Monday night, and you had mentioned that as being an issue, and that seems to be maybe something we could deal with on a regional basis. Thank you.
Laura, do you wish to respond?
Well, sure. It is an emerging problem, and Ed Bailey serves on the Mirror Board, so he can speak as well. But it is an emerging problem. The state of Connecticut has made the decision that they are not going to seek bond funds to help redevelop the burn plant in Hartford, where a lot of the towns in our region send the MSW. So that is something that we will need to figure out together as we look to take that facility offline and find another solution for our MSW.
Right, the cost of managing that solid waste is expected to rise if they don't come up with a solution.
And, one thing that we can all agree on is that there's no silver bullet solution to this. It's going to be a combination of things that help us get there if we cannot find a way to pay for a better emerging technology than what we are currently using.
Yes. Ed Bailey, I think you have your hand up.
Yeah, just to add to that, the entire waste management industry has been turned upside down, not only with the lack of the value of recyclables. Recyclables have very little value anymore. And the cost of electricity, even with the trash energy plant up in Hartford, they're budgeted to get 3.5 cents per kilowatt to sell it, and they're lucky right now to get about under 2 cents a kilowatt. And that supports the recycling, the income from recycling, the income from electricity supports our costs of trash disposal. And that is all turned upside down. And the only economical solution currently on the short-term horizon is to ship it out of state. And that's probably what's going to wind up to happen unless the state of Connecticut wants to step up to the plate and help us finance so we could build a facility that we can handle our trash in state. And many of our towns, if not most of them, all of them in River Cog, I think, have contracts with Mira for trash disposal. And this is a very common, common interest in all of our towns.
All right, that's a good regional subject because that's going to impact every one of us, I think. I'd like to just give the phone callers an opportunity. If you'd like to speak, go ahead on question number 3.
Frank, you might want to remind people how they do that, how to unmute themselves.
Yes, to unmute yourself, you have to go to the participants menu, and down at the bottom, you have a choice. It's the center button that says mute me or unmute me.
No, I think if you're on the phone, do you have to do *6?
Oh, I'm not familiar with that, Laura.
Anyone can confirm?
I think you're correct, Laura. And also we can manually unmute them, or at least Robin can.
All right.
It is *6, Frank. This is Deborah DeFelice.
You sound familiar.
And when I did want to speak, and I did know it was *6, but the first question, when you said we could talk, as soon as you finished saying we could talk, we went to the next question. And
all right.
And I did want to say that was how do we see our region? And I think people in this region want to, when you talk to younger people, when you talk to working people, a lot of people I work with live in Durham, Middlefield, and Wallingford, and they want things to do, things that are places to go, things to do, good paying jobs, and Laura hit it on the head, access to the internet. There is so many complaints about spotty or expensive access to the internet in this area that it would be nice if the region could fix that. But anyway, I'm going to mute now.
Well, thank you for your comments, Steph.
Do you mind giving us your name? Or if you did, I didn't hear it.
It's Deborah DeFelice.
Oh, that was Deborah. Okay.
All right. Let's see if we have any other comments, any other questions?
I'd like to make a comment. It's Mary Ann Corona.
Go ahead, Mary Ann.
The biggest issue I have all my life worked with the environmental groups is garbage in Connecticut. And the guess is that New York State will only take our garbage for several years. We have to address not only the actual household garbage, but all the plastic and all the other issues. It's being felt strongly in Long Island Sound. Every environmental group that I'm involved with is looking for partial solutions. So anybody who has any ideas how to address any of this, please let your organizations know. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be cheap, but we've got to do it for environmental reasons. And even the governor has noted it as probably the top issue in the state of Connecticut when we get through the virus issue.
Well, thank you very much for the comments. I see John has a hand up. Go ahead, John.
Yes, in the light of pandemic, many people realize that they don't have to live in a town or city where they work. And I think we should take advantage of this situation. I agree with Laura that we need to address the technology and make sure that the internet connections are strong. But if we can attract people from New York City to live in our towns and work in New York City, I think we'll benefit not only the real estate industry, but also our schools systems. Thank you.
Good point. So you see it as kind of an economic benefit related to the quality of life in our region.
Right.
Yeah, good, good. All right. Torrance, how are we doing for time?
I think we're just about through 10 minutes on that one.
All right. Want to move on to item number 4? Question
Okay.
4.
Number 4 is, what do we do well in our region and what could we do better? Any thoughts on that?
All right. I see Ed Bailey has his hand up. Ed, go ahead.
Well, we do quality of life in our region really well. And that always gets high points. And I think what we need to do is make sure that we enhance that, promote that. And, you know, for example, we're talking about, as we mentioned, about internet access and so on. That's something that can certainly enhance quality of life throughout our region. What we can do better, I'll get back to public transportation. I think that that's something we can do better. You know, we talk about overcrowding, for example, in our town here in Middlefield, our Wadsworth Falls State Park, which is, of course, a part of it's in Middletown, and it gets overwhelmed. And, you know, if there was maybe some better transportation, people could go to some of the other state parks in our region and spread out the load, if you will, of usage. So, and also for jobs and for young people to get to educational facilities. For example, one of the things we're looking at our transit study for the region is to make sure that we have adequate bus transportation to our community college and that's located in Middletown. So I think that's something that we can definitely do better with, and I think we're moving in that direction, but we have to constantly look at it and make sure we reinforce it. Thanks.
Thank you, Ed. Laura Francis, you have your hand up.
I echo Ed's comments about quality of life, and I think leading that is education. I think district to district to district in our region, we have strong educational systems, not only public school systems, but we have a number of private schools in our region that are strong and higher education. So I think we do education very well in our region. But something that you may not really know, but we do cooperation really well in our region, really well in our region. Our Council of Government meetings are incredibly productive we are incredibly generous with each other, and this happens not only with current leadership, but it has happened throughout several changes in leadership. So it's not just the people who are mayors and first selectmen currently. It's a culture that we have created in our region so that when there is turnover in the CEO position, that remains. That kind of cooperation remains. And that is something that needs to be cultivated, cherished, and protected, because it does not exist in every council of government across the state and across our nation. So we have to, really kind of say to each other, if there's a good idea, it could happen in River Cog region because of that kind of collaborative, cooperative relationships that we have at the leadership level. Where we could improve upon, we have to really make it a point to be proactive in equity and inclusion. We are not very diverse in our region, and I think we can do better in that. We need to get some education in that area, and we need to take a hard look on how our region has developed and how we can maybe improve upon making sure that everyone feels welcome and included in our region.
Thank you, Laura.
I'll just point out the cooperation's nonpartisan as well, which is really great.
It is nonpartisan. We do not ever bring politics into our conversations.
Yep, that's true. I can vouch for that. I would add myself that I see one of the challenges that the town faces and would be helpful if we could work on regionally is the economic issues. In other words, things like expenses and taxes. Taxes are rising now with COVID. It's questionable that people will be able to manage their funds and their payment of taxes and so forth in our communities, which are relatively expensive to live in. We do have a high quality of life, and I think that's what we do well in the region. I think branding that, promoting that, as was mentioned earlier, those things we need to do so that we can actually gain more value from that. But I think we have to be mindful of the cost of running our municipalities, and if we can regionalize in some way, I think that there's value there. I'll ask if there's anyone else that would like to speak, maybe either on the phones or commissioners from Durham or Middlefield, Planning and Zoning. How are we doing for time on this question, Torrance?
Well, we haven't used all 10 minutes, but if there are no other comments, we can go on and talk about how the RPOCD can help individual towns. What kind of policies or goals we could include in the plan that would be helpful to Middlefield and Durham.
All right, before we move off, anyone that'd like to speak on question number 4, what do we do well in our region, or what don't we do well? What could we do better? All right, I'd say we could move on to the next question then.
Okay, and I'll just read it again. How could a regional plan of conservation and development support your town?
All right. Comments or questions regarding this one? Hopefully comments. How could a regional plan of conservation and development support Durham or Middlefield? Okay, I see Ed Bailey from Middlefield. Go ahead.
Well, just to sort of reiterate previous comments, but basically it's going to help breed and facilitate cooperation between all the towns in the region. I think that's key. And it will help us identify our common goals that we can work together on, and also help us to identify weaknesses and give us perhaps some suggestions or ideas as to improving those weaknesses. So I think it's good that we all be on the same page. We don't have to all be on the exact same page, but by us all working together, getting back to the comments about creating a brand, we want to create a brand for our region here. We have to provide a similar product, if you will, a similar experience. And I think that's how this regional plan of conservation and development can help us achieve that goal. Thanks.
The goal of branding.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Laura, I see you have your hand up. Laura Francis.
Yeah, so Ed touched upon, communication. So I think that we need to formalize how this plan can help us is to maybe formalize a process that we have kind of informally right now. And that is, say, our planner gets a call for somebody who would like to do something in Durham or Middlefield, and it just doesn't work out. Well, our planner should be calling another planner in our region and say, hey, I have somebody, on the line. We couldn't make it fit in Durham. We couldn't make it fit in Middlefield, but maybe it can fit in Haddam, or maybe it could go to Old Saybrook. We need to start promoting each other a little bit more than maybe we are doing now. I think it happens informally, but I think creating a formal process to do that will kind of keep the talent, keep the opportunities, and keep it in our region versus letting it go. Because even though there's a lot of similarities between our towns, there's enough differences that if we couldn't check all the boxes on one thing, perhaps another town in our region can.
Okay, good. I see Tatiana, you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say that it would give them more visibility to all the towns across the region. The tri-state region, I don't know, across America. I think it would be good for those little towns, those small towns to get known through this regional plan.
Yes. And the regional plan of conservation and development, the thing is that serves as a reference document as well. So when the towns, are looking at what's been done in other towns, or what goals are, what other communities within the region are doing, it serves as a communication tool as well. It's a good point. Thank you, Tatiana. Josh, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead.
One thing that's in the same vein, and I can appreciate the first selectman and first selectwoman sort of mentioning cooperation, but I also want to make sure that it gets put in as like sort of the communal goals that the state will take a hard look at, and as they're allocating, their resources, that it becomes a better case if it's benefiting, multiple towns. I think this is sort of an obvious thing, as well as grouping applications for grants and things like that, now benefit a larger swath of people because we're grouping them together into common goals.
That's a good point. There's certainly fiscal advantages, and of course, when the states are looking at funding and so forth and so on, they if we make it a goal that we have cooperation as a goal, I think that would go a long way. Even though I think that, as Laura alluded to, the cooperation in this region, the people that I see around the table at RiverCog, they have always worked together and they've done a great job of doing that. But I think the idea of having, as one of the goals, to improve or maintain the level of cooperation between the municipalities is a good one to have.
Frank, may I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So when we were going through our local update of our POCD, we were required to make sure that we were not in opposition of the state plan of conservation and development. So here now we have another layer, right? So we have the state plan, now we're gonna have the regional plan, and then we have our local plan. Is it going to be difficult for all of those plans to be compatible? Because I gotta say that when we were doing our local plan, we discovered that the state has some issues with Durham that maybe we don't like. They see Durham a little bit differently than maybe Durham sees Durham. So how are we going to figure that out, Sam?
That's a very good question. And Sam, you would like to respond to Laura?
Sure. The good thing about the regional plan is it's a visioning document for the region. It's a tool to get towns to work together, identify the common things that they should be doing together to address these bigger issues that everyone's facing. It is not incumbent on the towns or land use commissions that they have to be in conformity with. We would like you to be in conformity. We would like you to include, consider including recommendations from this document and from in your next plan update. And because it's a visionary document, it's a voluntary document. That's why we're here tonight. We are going to every town's planning commissions specifically because the planning and zoning commissions are the ones who have the powers to regulate land use in the state. And if you don't feel like we've consulted you, if you don't see a partner to support you, and in the creation of this document, you're not going to think about consulting it in the future. And we want this to be relevant and useful to you in doing your work. Will it be 100% in conformity with everyone's town plans? No, it won't. Sometimes you might need a regional document to say some difficult things that can't be said in the town document. But the goal here is to be a guide. We're not going to micromanage, what happens on what parcel, though there will be a future land use map that will make recommendations for areas of development and areas of conservation. But it will be more general in nature. It won't necessarily be parcel based. The idea here is, this will assist RiverCog's work. This will help with state grants. It will help with prioritizing money potentially. It also can be used by your commissions in support of your decisions. This is one more document that you can take in as you make decisions on applications, on zoning changes, to consult and say this is something relevant and legitimate that we had input on, and this proposal is supported or not supported by the regional plan, and use that in your calculations of how you make your decisions. So that's something which we want this to be a tool for you. This is not meant to dictate anything to you, although I can't guarantee that it's going to be 100% in conformity. And when we write, Torrance is in charge of our land use referrals to both your commissions. When we review proposals that you get in or that you send in to us, we'll make comments. We'll say, if this is in conformity with the plan or not, or what goals it supports or not, because we want to take this document seriously. But at the end of the day, powers remain with you. So this is meant to help you, not to complicate things.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Laura. I see George has his hand up. Go ahead, George.
Thank you, Frank. George Eames from the town of Durham. And first, I just was curious. Has anyone, Frank, ever told you that you sound exactly like Michael Kay from the Yes Network? What an amazing voice. You should be doing
Thank you, George.
Should be doing the Yankee games. Basically, I have a broad-based question more to Rivercog. And I'm wondering if you forgive the Christopher Columbus euphemism, how flat is the River Cog map of the 16 towns? Ed Bailey has mentioned that Middlefield clearly is touching Middletown on one side and Meriden on the other. We clearly touch Middletown as well as Wallingford. If you cross the edge, do you fall off a cliff?
That's a good point, George. Regionally, you know, the state is divided into these regions, but you know, even with some of our referrals, we go to the other regions and we say, okay, we're going to make this change, and does this impact you? There is that back and forth that's intermunicipal impacts that's looked at, but it's a very good point. I'll ask Sam and Torrance if they'd like to weigh in on that. Go ahead.
So I'll weigh in that no, it's not the end of the world. And we work very closely with our neighbors and our neighboring COGs and our neighboring towns. You know, just to our west is the South Central Regional Council of Governments, and in a number of different areas, we are actually part of the same region. So Laura and Torrance are very involved in our emergency planning district, which is the Dems Region 2, which is most of Middlesex County, and then the New Haven area. And we're currently working on a regional approach to how we deal with the response and recovery from COVID-19. So on many different areas, we work on different scales. So for emergency response, we work on a larger scale, which covers multiple regions. But there's many scales to regional. So as you know, if you're a regional school district or your shared transfer station. So that's why we list the number of towns in this context. We do coordinate. One thing that we're looking at is very closely is bike ped connections between our regions. And how do you connect our region to Meriden? How could you make it possible for someone to safely cycle into Meriden and take the train? You're not that far, but is it safe? That's the question. And
George, this is Torrance. In particular to this question, Meriden is a town that I often have conversations with in terms of, you know, the town planner with respect to regulation changes. And just recently, they were trying to get a regulation passed very quickly at the beginning of this pandemic situation, where they were looking to relieve their town of a lot of the parking regulations. It was part of the executive order, but we bent over backwards to help them out so that they could meet their timeline through this inter-region coordination. So yeah, I would say of late, Meriden has been one of our most common towns to coordinate with outside of this region. So that's a good question, George.
All right. Thank you very much, George Eames, Selectman for the town of Durham. Any other questions or comments on question number 5? How could a regional plan of conservation and development support your town? Anyone on the phone wishing to speak? All right. Torrance, Joe Pasquale. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I guess this, the comment is more for maybe Sam and Torrance. When the COG was developed and the 17 towns, when I look at the map, why was not Madison included in our region? And could it possibly be included? Is there benefits for us?
So I can answer that. The state decided that the regions should be reorganized starting in the beginning of the last decade, around 2010, 2011. And most of the current COG regions were formed out of existing organizations. So the Connecticut River Estuary Regional Planning Agency and the Mid-State Regional Planning Agency. Mid-State covered northern part of Middlesex County, and Estuary covered southern part of Middlesex County plus Lyme and Old Lyme. So those two organizations in whole merged together. And Madison, which has been a member of the South Central Regional COG for a long time, has stayed a member. That doesn't mean that we don't work with Madison. In fact, Ed Bailey and Laura Francis talked a little bit about regional transportation and regional transit. As part of our reorganizing of transit in our region, we're going to do some outreach to Madison to see if they'd be interested in joining with us on a regional transit district, just because we're providing the bus companies are providing service in Madison, and there could be benefit for the town. So these COG lines, although at some level they have to be arbitrary to some extent, they're not set in stone. They're not the edge of the world, and we do cross them all the time as projects come up and as different services or relationships are needed. So
Yeah, and Joe, you're probably aware of this, but the original regional planning organizations, and I think there were 15 originally, they were established in the early 60s, going through to the late 60s. And at that time, they came up with the boundaries, and Madison was thought to be part of the New Haven region. And as Sam said, when we had this reorganization within the last 10 years, in some cases, there was some cherry picking of towns that went from one region to another, but that was when one of the regions was, for instance, split in two to be absorbed in two adjacent regions. But yeah, they've been, the boundaries, other than the recent, consolidations, have been really stable for decades. And it was just an original thought that, Madison was more like New Haven than it was, as a member of the region that has the river as its core. So, yeah, interesting question.
And funds, we've supported the town of Clinton, and in many respects, it makes sense for Clinton to regionalize services, like let's say for 911 in that direction. So, when it comes up, the COG boundaries doesn't stop the towns from cooperating together.
Frank, can I comment?
Of course.
Yeah, so it is a good question and a good comment, because sometimes cooperation doesn't necessitate a common border. And our government, our state government, has passed laws recently, and Sam could expound on this a little bit better than me, that now allow towns, any two towns to do, or any 3 or 4 towns, that any one town can do on its own together. So through the work of our advocacy in Hartford over these years, we've greatly enhanced ability to cooperate, even if you're not in the same region, even if you don't share a border. And technology is going to be very, very important in that regard, with the broadband technology and with the internet and the statewide fiber network. You literally can be partners with another town doing things seamlessly without even sharing a border.
And Frank, if I may,
I see Ed Bailey has his hand up also.
Yeah, just to give you an example, we, within the last 2 years, joined the town of Middlefield, joined the Plainville-Southington Health District, and we do not border on those towns. And that's going out, we looked at maybe joining one of the health districts in the River Cog area, but that was not a good fit. The best fit was over at Southington and Plainville. So we're very flexible on these when it comes to regionalization, and we're not constrained.
All right, that's good. All right, are there any folks on the telephone that wish to speak now? Any other comments from commissioners or any others that wish to comment on question number 5? How could a regional plan of conservation development support your town?
Excuse me, can anyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good. I wasn't sure how well star 6 would work.
That works.
My name is Kathleen Kokoska. I'm part of Middlefield. I'd like to offer a historical perspective for my community for the sake of the conservation aspect of this plan. My roots here go back 100 years. Back in the 50s when I was growing up, Middlefield was family farms. And I won't go into the description of how that all worked, how everybody helped one another out, but I've seen over the last going on 70 years now, the family farms have pretty much disappeared. We've got Lyman's and a few other areas, but they're gone. They've disappeared into housing developments. They've been sold by people who could no longer afford to keep them, people who retired, their children sold the land and they got out of town. And I'm seeing Middlefield being slowly nibbled away. It looks to everyone like we have a great deal of land yet, but they're not looking at it from my history. They can't see what I once saw. And I'm concerned that down the road, there's going to be less and less of Middlefield. And if you ask people, they're going to say, well, we love the rural character here. Well, what's going to help us preserve that rural character for down the road? And it is important. We had people, I remember people 20 years ago who were coming here because it was just too crowded where they were. People who came from Cromwell because they felt that they were just one on top of one another and they wanted a feeling of space. I remember when, I think it was Jim Gibbons who was doing talks going around from the Yukon Extension Service a good 10, maybe 15 years ago to the various P&Zs expounding on the importance of not only open space from the sake of tax and tax bases, but the psychological importance of open space and green space on people when they come into a community where they just feel that they can breathe and they can move. And I want to know how you, the Rivercog, will help Middlefield keep that quality down the road.
Very good question, and
my
thank
concern.
you very much. Who would like to take that? Sam, Torrance?
Well, I'll start with it. So part of that is exactly us hearing that comment. The whole purpose of tonight is to get guidance from you as to what's important to the towns, to the residents of the towns, to the commissioners in the towns, and that's something that we'll be recording down as part of this. Community.
For a while, there was money from the state to help buy open space, but that doesn't really exist anymore. So
Open space grants are still there are still some funds for open space acquisition. It's not, you're right. The state doesn't have as much money it's not putting as much money into that as they used to, and I don't expect in the future they'll have as much money. The silver lining, so the issue of COVID is that it's massively going to affect all of the budgets. So there may not be money to buy the easements or buy the land. And it might be, and there is a risk there of a double whammy because if you have people leaving from New York wanting to come here,
and you're seeing that on the news the last week or so.
But
I'm sorry, I'm an interrupter. You have to excuse me for that.
Oh, that's
but
okay.
Eyewitness News has been putting stories out about how all of a sudden property values are going up. It's starting at the shore, but they expect it to creep further north.
Well, I think the takeaway that we're taking from here is, and I think it's the struggle for all of our communities, is how do we maintain what makes our places, our town special and attractive, and the places that we want to live in and our families want to live in, while at the same time accommodating change, which is we're always going to be accommodating change. There's always going to be change. That's going to be the constant. But how do we protect those things that are the essential, valuable things that make these our towns places we want to be in?
So Sam, is there, maybe you could give us a little bit of a feedback. How will the plan of conservation and development help to preserve those areas?
So very specifically, we will have a recommended future land use map, and we will be recommending areas where development should be focused, and areas where conservation should be focused. Areas where you have, let's say, active agriculture and prime agricultural soils, areas that are that have important historical characteristics for the landscape. Being identified, let's say, as a conservation area will help us find money, whether it be on the state or federal level, to help, let's say, buy conservation easements or buy land. Ultimately, private property, people who own private property pay taxes, and they are entitled to be able to use their land profitably. So there's a balancing act there, but the hope would be that that this document would be in addition to your town plan and to the state plan, to try to make sure that we preserve what's special and important of Middlefield, while at the same time realizing that we're never, if you're a museum, you're dead. You need to be alive, and that means accommodating change. So it's a very careful balancing act, and it's the struggle that every single town faces, and we hope that this document will help answer some of those questions as to, okay, these are the areas where change is good, and these are the areas where we would like to conserve.
All right, thank you very much. I see Joe Pasquale has his hand up. Go ahead, Joe.
Sam, will the towns be playing a role in the development of the maps that you're referring to for conservation and land use?
Oh, definitely. So the Regional Planning Committee is charged, has been appointed, and created by the CEOs that sit on the board of RiverCog, and given the responsibility of creating the draft plan. They provide the oversight on this document. We have a staff at RiverCog, and we have a planning consultant, FHI, who's assisting us with this project. But ultimately, it's the regional planning commissioners who will be providing the oversight and input and really helping guide the development of this document. And then this will eventually get referred up to the CEOs, Laura Francis and Ed Bailey, for them to adopt. So yeah, this is and that's why we're here tonight, is because we want this to be the town's document. This isn't RiverCog staff's document. It is the document of the 17 towns, and we want to make sure that we hear you and we reflect accurately what's important to you and what you're saying.
Yes, and that's true of all 17 towns for everyone that's on the call tonight. The Regional Planning Committee felt very strongly that there was a need to have this one-on-one interaction with each town. Granted, tonight we're sharing with Middlefield, but that's not unusual for us. And so that they actually developed this relationship between RiverCog and this project and the towns themselves, so that the towns play a part in this. And as we talk a little bit in some of the upcoming slides, I'm sure Torrance and Sam will walk us through exactly what the plan is. Before we move on, are there any other comments related to question number 5? How could a regional plan of conservation and development support your town? If not, Torrance?
Well, that's the last one. And Sam, I'll go ahead and throw this over to you to bring us on home.
Okay, great. All right. So we are very grateful for your participation tonight. Thank you for all your comments and your feedback. I've been taking notes the whole time on the back of.
As have I.
Yep. And we also will be referring to the recording of the meeting as well to make sure we get everything correct. So we will be compiling all these comments and then those from the other towns, and then analyzing them and really using this information that we're hearing from every one of the towns and the different commissions to inform the policies and recommendations and the goals of the regional plan. As we move forward, there are plenty of other ways for you to get involved. First, we have our website for the project, rivercogregionalplan.org. This is where you'll find draft documents. This is where you'll find recordings of the different meetings. And copies of these presentations if you would like to download them. You also can sign up for email notifications. So if you type in your email address in the chat box, we'll get you on our email distribution list. Let's see. We also will have other meetings as we progress with this project a little later on. So those, if you're on our mailing list, you'll get invites to those. You can also reach out to your RPC members via the link on our website with any thoughts, comments, or concerns. The RPC will be meeting regularly to review drafts of the regional plan and direct the land use policies that are going to be in it. So they are here to represent you. So our anticipated timeline, here it is. We're expecting 5 phases. And we're currently in phase 2 with the introductory presentations that we did a couple weeks ago, and the municipal meetings, which we're holding with all of our towns right now over July and August. Let's see. We expect this project to be completed in the spring of 2021. And so there will be meetings over the course of this project. All the regional planning committee meetings are open to the public, and they're posted on the RiverCog site. So you're welcome to attend any of those. And currently all of our meetings are held via Zoom. So they're easy to attend. Concurrent with this outreach process that we're currently doing, our team has been hard at work at creating an existing conditions report for the region. And that draft existing conditions report will be completed over the course of the summer, and that will be the next big milestone for the project. Let's see. And as I said, before we go to questions, here's the contact info. Currently, Frank DeFelice is your member of the Regional Planning Committee, and Joe Pasquale is the alternate. We do have vacancies for Middlefield. So if any of you are interested in representing Middlefield on the RPC, please contact Ed Bailey or your planning and zoning commission chair, and we can see about getting you appointed. We've also set up email addresses for comments to your regional planning commission members. So that's Durham RPC@gmail.com and Middlefield RPC@gmail.com. Also, our senior planner, Megan Juflis, she is the project manager for RiverCog, and her email address is mjuflis@rivercog.org. And once again, you can find a lot of this information at rivercogregionalplan.org. So I think that wraps it up. So any other questions that you have that you would like us to answer, this is the time to ask.
All right, so we can go back to any of the other questions, or if you have other comments you want to make, or if you have questions about anything to do with the Regional Plan of Conservation and Development, please feel free to raise your hand or chime in, and we'll recognize you. Josh, go ahead.
I guess I was looking for a bit of historical context, and then, so is this the first regional plan of development that's been created, or is it just that it hasn't been done in some time, or this current sort of grouping as the RiverCog? I guess that's my first question, and then we can.
So the answer to all those is yes. This is the first regional plan for this for the 17 towns as currently posed. Mid-State Regional Planning Agency did do a regional plan of conservation development, but that plan was probably done about 40 years ago. There might have been something in the 80s. So that was Jeff Colgrove. I don't think there was anything more recent than that. The Estuary Regional Planning Agency, they completed a draft regional plan for that, for those towns in 2012. But because of the impending merger, it was never adopted as a regional plan. So this very much is our first regional plan for River Cog and for this region as assembled. But first regional plan in the state. This is required by state statute that something like this be done every 10 years. Our neighboring regions have recently completed theirs. That's the South Central region and the Southeast Connecticut region. So so we have good examples in other parts of the state to look at, and we have looked at those.
And so just, I might have sort of missed this. So this is the first for us, but other regions have completed these in the past, and it is required every 10 years?
Correct. Yes.
And how does this plan typically get utilized by something like the state DOT plan or something? Or I guess that's one area that I can imagine it could be very impactful, but it only if the state has a process to use these things.
So, okay, so I'm going to take off my regional planning organization hat and put on my MPO hat. RiverCog is both a regional planning organization and also a metropolitan planning organization. And the MPO designation is a federal designation for transportation planning. And every 4 years, we're required to do a regional transportation plan. So, and that plan is supposed to guide how federal money is spent in our part of Connecticut. The DOT is supposed to follow that. The CEOs, Ed Bailey, Laura Francis, and the others actually have to approve how federal funds are spent in our region. Generally, they're not controversial, but this is specifically meant to give them a voice on projects that may be controversial. The DOT can proceed on those projects with federal funds. This was something that was given to the towns about 50 years ago when powers were devolved to mayors. Getting leverage on DOT is difficult. They own all of our major main streets in the region. I am happy to say that over the last 10 years, I've seen a generational change over at DOT, and they are much more interested in and more inclusive transportation, walking, cycling, transit. They seem to be more interested in livability and the fact that people need to get places. It's not just about cars; it's about people. So they can still be difficult, and many times they live in a silo in Newington and don't really understand what's going on in our communities as much as we'd like them to. But the COGs have a role in that, in communicating with DOT clearly, and trying to make sure that they understand what's important to the town and what the towns would like or not like. But it is a struggle.
Okay, Josh?
That was my question, so I'm good.
You're good? Okay. All right. Are there any other questions related to tonight's presentation or the plan or how to contact anyone at RiverCog? Couple things I guess I'll add, and then anyone has anything that they'd like to chime in with, that's fine. I think it's important that we're engaged in this process because we need to share our visions, both Middlefield and Durham, and we have to identify important issues for us, and we want to be the folks that are out there critiquing the work that's being done on this plan. So I'm hoping that everyone that's on tonight's call, and even if you're not on tonight's call, but you learn about this and you perhaps view this later on, you do participate and you're engaged in this plan. Just as with any municipal plan, there will be goals in this plan, and I think it's important that the folks that are on this call contribute to that, deciding what those goals are for this region. So with that, I guess anyone else that would like to speak or has any comments or questions?
Actually, this is Kathleen Kokoska again. I do have a suggestion on the development side. I have a home-based business. My brother has a home-based business. We don't have signs up. We're not noticeable at all, but yet we have businesses and we pay taxes. And I'm sure that there are a lot of other people like us in the communities. What can you do to help increase home-based businesses, especially in the light of COVID, when you have so many people out of work who are probably thinking, okay, I can't find a job, so maybe I can make myself a job.
Sam, would you like to take that?
Oh, sure. So first of all, you might have heard a couple of times this previous plan that we'd worked on, the GrowSmart Strategic Economic Study. And that report identified exactly that there are a lot of self-employed people who could potentially be anywhere and are working from home, and they're working from home here. And it identified this, some of the different types of businesses that could help support, or services that could help support those people. The issues brought on by COVID are pretty new. In the past, we would have said, having some meeting space, a meeting room or a conference space that home workers could use on a regular basis, or some basic sort of administrative support that could be supported. Right now, people are avoiding other people and not having in-person meetings, of course. But it is something that we have been thinking about, and we work very closely with the Middlesex County Chamber of Commerce. They actually sit on our board. They have a representative, and that's something that looking forward to how we recover from this. We're going to be working very closely with them, and I think home-based and self-employed people is going to be a huge component of that recovery. Small businesses like those are inherently more resilient. The days of having one big employer and everyone working for that one person, that one company are sort of over, and it makes you very dependent of that employer. We are more resilient when we have a variety of businesses, and small businesses tend to be also good neighbors in their towns because they live where they work. So I don't have all the answers exactly how we're going to recover from COVID, and very much like this is still an unraveling situation, unfortunately. But it is something that we will take into consideration.
Sam, Laura and Ed and a number of folks brought up the idea of promoting these lifestyle type jobs working from home. So a policy in this regional plan could be, support this kind of change in the way we do business. And recommendations might be that, each P&Z in each of the 17 towns should consider or could consider looking at their zoning regulations and perhaps relaxing some standards, perhaps about signage in residential areas, or other things that that could happen in these towns, because in a lot of cases these type of things that you're talking about, I think business visibility, especially if it's a work, a home occupation kind of thing, it's the zoning regulations that can be modified to perhaps provide a little leeway. So that's an example of how a policy from this regional plan could be used at the local level. If the P&Z wanted to address that kind of revision, if they wanted to support that, they could cite the regional plan and say, well, our regional plan says we should be supporting this, and looking at these changes is consistent with the regional plan and possibly with your local plan. So that's one example of how a regional plan can be used.
Well, I think a lot of people who have home-based businesses don't necessarily need signs, so to speak, because we develop our own client base. But for the person who wants create a home-based business. I would like to see them be able to go over to our town hall and be able to walk away with a folder of information that maybe RiverCog could develop to tell them how to do it and what's available to them and who they can call and numbers, and just help them get off the ground.
That's
To your point, that would be a consideration. Yes.
And I'll just this is a little I think this this idea is a little bit outside of the regional plan, but is something which I think we will be looking at. We are working on a grant application to the Federal Economic Development Administration for economic development planning work in Connecticut in the light of COVID, and how are we going to rebuild our economy from this recession we're going into. And I've been working with Larry McHugh at the chamber, and I think small business support like that, and making sure from a regulatory standpoint that we have regulations that are supportive of people starting their own businesses. I think is very important on both the town and state level.
Yeah, and that would be a great example of regional cooperation and partnership. You're right, Sam.
All right. I see Jay, you have your hand up. Go ahead. Jay?
Hi, Jay Brown from Middlefield. How about doing something with standardization of forms for the region? That might help out an awful lot. And I know we've been struggling with that and making great headway here in Middlefield, but I think that if it was something that was done on a regional level, it might, with some input from you guys, might be a big help.
I think that's a great idea. I think the best opportunity that we have in this is e-government, online government. How do you reduce the need to go to town hall? How do you get the documents and transact the business you need to transact with town hall on your schedule, 24/7 online, and not have to go into the town hall? How do you get access to your documents and your questions answered? It does not make sense to build 17 separate databases and electronic forms, and this is the opportunity to do it once, do it right, do it once, have a common platform, pay for that work and hosting once, and it's something.
Divided by 17.
What?
It's divided by 17. It becomes cost effective.
Exactly, and like for example, I put in for a grant application at the end of last year for a pilot project to figure out how you digitize a couple building departments, and I got Killingworth and Chester to go in on this application. And the idea would be you digitize the folders of all the property folders, and you would try to you would create a single platform that would be expandable to all 17 towns, and then you can, and it would be particularly helpful now if people can get answers to the questions and transact business with the town online. Then you don't have to worry about as much of the foot traffic in town hall and potential exposures. And so these are, and it also makes it can make the workflow a lot more efficient.
Yeah, I mean, think about it.
Pay our taxes online.
Oh, exactly. That is the most ridiculous thing that I've seen in Connecticut is that, if you pay by check, either you get charged no fee. If you pay electronically, there's a fee. And whereas that check creates labor in the town hall, that it has to go process that paper. The money is not immediately available until it gets deposited in the bank. Whereas if we could come up with a way of processing all those payments electronically, that churn of money, the cost of that electronic transfer goes way down per transfer. And that's something which the towns could do together and just have all that money remitted electronically to each town's account. And we can pay our state taxes electronically without a fee on the DRS.
And the federal.
And federal.
Yeah.
And I've been paying my, unfortunately, been paying my Connecticut state income taxes electronically with the routing number and account number of my checking account with no fee. So could we create a town tax payment clearinghouse? That's something which I've actually brought to the state's attention, that and that's something which the amount of money that you would have going through that account would probably bring the transaction cost way down.
I mean, even if we did it on a regional level.
Yeah.
I mean, trying to get the state to do something is difficult. We all know that.
And
yeah,
particularly with the forms that you mentioned, because we have 17 examples out there. Every one of us has a building permit. Every one of us has, a zoning permit. And there, you could just take them, put together a team that would take the very best and then see if it's acceptable to the municipality.
Rank and file. Yep.
Yeah. Good. Excellent points. Ed Bailey, I think you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted a sort of an antidote to that, what Jay mentioned. The current pandemic situation certainly has, I know in Middlefield, has changed the way we do business. And it has forced our town staff, that many of which we do this because this is the way we do it and we're not changing anything, but they had to change. And so we are seeing different ways of doing business, and it's much more efficient. Even our operation is so much more efficient just with minor changes. And it is an opportunity that we see, and I believe, as Sam pointed out, of course, why do we want a lot of foot traffic in our town hall? Why do we want to have 20 people trying to pay their taxes and this, that, and the other thing? One thing we did in Middlefield, because unfortunately some people have to pay their taxes in person. So we have a walk-up window where they can walk up and pay their taxes through a window. But, we have emphasized, paying taxes online and so on and so forth. And, but this pandemic certainly has opened up the eyes, my eyes, to see and has forced staff to make changes and efficiencies. And I think it's good.
We've learned a lot in the last 4 months. We really have.
We absolutely have. Yes. Yes, Torrance.
Yes, we certainly have had to adopt. All right. Are there any other questions or comments? If not, I'm going to say I am grateful to Torrance and to Sam for tonight's presentation on behalf of everyone that's participating. And I guess if you do need to get a hold of anyone, or you'd like more information, or you would like to submit your comments, the nice thing is they've set up these websites where the emails can go. Very easy to remember: DurhamRPC@gmail.com, MiddlefieldRPC@gmail.com. Sam and Torrance, do you have any closing comments you'd like to make?
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it. And just want to plug, RPC meetings are held monthly. Ours is coming up. Let's see. I can't minimize the screen. Let's see. And then I can look at my
27th,
calendar.
I think, July 27th.
July 27th. So our next RPC meeting is July 27th.
It's a week from Monday.
We usually hold it the fourth Monday of the month at 7 o'clock. So people are welcome to attend. Also, the same thing with our COG meetings; they're also open to the public. So, but please check out our website for the project, rivercogregionalplan.org. We'll be keeping that up to date with information, and we hope we hear from you throughout this process. So thank you.
And I just want to thank Robin Newton for assisting getting this up and running. So Robin, thank you for your help.
Thank you again, Robin.
Anytime.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And it would be appropriate to have a motion to adjourn. I see Dick Erickson's making a motion to adjourn.
Can
Is
I
there a
make a
s-
second, Frank?
Do I have a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Opposed? Abstaining? I declare the motion passed, and thank you, everyone, for joining tonight's presentation from Rivercog.
Thank you, everybody.
And from the Planning
Thank you
and
very
Zoning
much.
Commission.
Good night.
Good
Nice
night.
job.
Thank you. Good
Thank
night.